I really feel like that's the best proof it is. And
it's going to be right here.
he comes all the way here, you know, this was his first appearance in America, and people still aren't playing the game for shame, you know. I certainly hope, but you know, if that's not going to convince them, I don't think anything is.
All right, sorry that we couldn't get to more audience participation. We'll do that now. Someone had something they wanted to say. All right, you've been trying to raise your hand for a while.
We can do just 6, but go. But anything, yes. Yeah. I have.
Around the mic. What? You want to run around with the mic again?
Yes, I like running around with the mic.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the next panel again. But,
It's all right. It's all right. You know.
But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
All right, so you were next. There we go.
I appreciate it.
Is this on? All right, I got a Wolseleyism for you because you mentioned luck. Call me a treasure hunter, I'll rip your lungs out. Remember that one?
Oh, yes, I do.
South Figaro scenario. So I really like the Vector part, where Vector was destroyed by the Espers, and you have to go and have dinner with the Emperor, and you gotta talk to all the soldiers beforehand.
Yeah.
You know those really great things, you get the really great relics.
Yeah, and Kefka's in prison, he asks you what you want to do with him.
And he responds to you by taking a dump. I mean, that was kind of weird, but and it was clear how, in the future, you were going to get screwed. They were going to screw you in the end, because you had to fight like 2 soldiers, and you had to fight them during the dinner. It was really weird.
I didn't believe him for a minute, you know, and that was only like the 3rd RPG.
But how many? But you know, even back then, you know, you felt something was fishy.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's definitely true. That was a really good scene. You get to see like what the Empire was like. You saw how steampunkish it was and all that. You saw how they were mistreating the Espers. It's all it looks like one of those animal rights commercials. Only it's Esper's rights. You know, the animals can't really cast fireball at you or anything like that.
It's creepy after the floating continent rise. Vector is deserted, you know, and you know, like what happened to the Empire? You know, did they kill them ritually just for fun, or did Kefka practice more of his magic, including that spell that he inexplicably got that allows you to turn an Esper into Magicite instantly? Did he practice it on all the soldiers or something like that? That's how he figured it out. Again,
what would
the shell gameplay with story,
but if the Espers turned into Magicite, what would soldiers turn into when hit with that?
Yeah. Candy.
It turned into gobstoppers. All right, so.
But yeah, I mean, we'd also tried, you know, like, with the exception, unfortunately, of Phantasy Star, just, you know, Squaresoft Odyssey, other reasons, I just never got around to playing it, but I'm pretty open to almost any RPG before the PlayStation era, so.
Speaking of RPGs,
you can certainly suggest things, but I don't think
Alright, one more before we move on. Alright, hold on, just wait for the microphone real quick.
A Secret Evermore, he said, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I heard you said it.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I want to discuss about Secret of Evermore.
Yep, go ahead.
It has been ridiculed by most people I've talked to, but I find it to be one of the finest games.
Alright, what makes you like it so much?
The basis that they have special currencies for different locations, as well as the in-depth story about this one boy who's been introduced to a sci-fi world, getting placed into a fantasy world of dinosaurs, Egyptians, and the medieval world. It's amazing, and also it gives an in-depth story with all the main characters, or at least doubles the being part of the main problem against all these other cast of characters who have been sent to this world. I just find it fascinating that most people don't know it.
The little touches of the dog, you know, how he changes in each area. But I think it's largely like Mystic Quest. People have their conspiracy theories that were formed, obviously, before the internet. And unlike, say, in the direction of Earthbound, it hasn't fostered well-being and interest. It's just fostered contempt for Evermore and Mystic Quest.
Yeah, I admit it has some bugs, but otherwise, it's so fun. I just don't know why they're fun.
The point you made, the first point you made, I find really fascinating about most RPGs, like the fact they had a different monetary system for different places. I find, you know, it's one of those things you don't think about while you're playing most RPGs. But with the exception of a few that can be justified, like for instance in Final Fantasy VII, where Shinra basically controls the entire planet, it makes no sense for them to have a universal currency. Like Final Fantasy VI, why the heck does Castle Figaro operate on the same currency as the empire that's trying to crush them? Why does Science Kingdom do that? Why do any of them do that?
Well, that's the other fun part.
You're thinking about it too much.
Yeah, the other part.
Turn off now, horrible.
The only other thing, sorry, is the trade system's actually more elaborate than most other games that you actually experience. Even in like Zelda, that's more like a straight line thing. But in this game, you have several different choices of how you want to trade your items to even upgrade yourself or get different upgrades that you won't expect. It's just, I just find it more fascinating than most people would say.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of barter system, it's definitely something that's atypical for a lot of games. Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, it's a shame that they sacrifice something that detailed and in favor of simplicity a lot of times. Unfortunately, now the only time you really see that a lot is in like say MMORPGs because people would just I have this, I want to trade for this and whatnot. But yeah, I think if they incorporate that into more traditional console RPGs, that would be excellent. All right, you had something you want to say, Robin?
Is the reason why you stopped at Final Fantasy VI because you thought 6 and behind was the retro generation Final Fantasy?
No, we just did it arbitrarily. I think, we weren't even sure both panels would be accepted, so we kind of just did it at a larf and in thinking, why we made it a little bit shorter than the 1.5 hour because, more range, obviously. But we're glad to see there's interest here. But I think it was simply that's the arbitrary standards, at the end of the Super Nintendo, that kind of was the cutoff.
Well, I wouldn't go that far as to say that was the cutoff. There was a certain other RPG that is just as, if not more legendary than Final Fantasy VI, and that is the next game I'd like to talk about. Chrono
the Super
Trigger.
Nintendo. That's what I'm saying, Super Nintendo,
Now, how many of you played Chrono Trigger before any Final Fantasy game? Anyone?
Oh, interesting, yeah.
Excellent. Secret of Mana as well. We can get to that next. But Chrono Trigger was completely different from any RPG I had played. The fact that it didn't have a random encounter system, well, not really, and you fought, where you were walking. I thought that just made everything so much more streamlined, and the fact that they incorporated all the different gameplay elements they did was great. And each character, had their own little abilities that they had. They learned it, at their own pace, and just the story. Granted, time travel wasn't anything new, but they did it so damn well. The jumping around between the different time periods, seeing the end of the world, seeing Lavos, and just even though there weren't as many characters as in Final Fantasy VI, they were all just so good. Each of them had an even more in-depth backstory. Like you had Marl, who was actually the princess, and she was a rebellious princess. You didn't find out until later. You had Luca, the egghead. Obviously, Chrono was a silent protagonist. You're supposed to,
Yeah, I guess.
And then yes, Magus.
Awesome.
The frickin' man.
You got whacked because you're weak.
But so how many people didn't accidentally kill him because you didn't realize that not fighting him could get you him in the party?
My friend spoiled it, so I learned. Oh, you did. Yeah.
That time I played the game.
Oh man, absolutely love it. The only thing I was disappointed with Magus being in the party is that he only had, 2 or 3 combo attacks?
Yeah. Dark Eternal and I forgot the name.
I thought it was. They had the one with Luca and Marl, then the one with Luca and Robo. What was that? Right. That's right. But yeah, all the different endings and the different ways you can get about them, and there was even a way to do things, like I don't want to say a challenge mode, but then there was the most difficult ending to get as far as not like timing or anything, but fighting Lavos when Chrono is supposed to die, and why am I brain farting now?
The new Game Plus feature in general was awesome.
They have the Kingdom and Zeal, yes, thank you. Fighting him then, and just that wasn't the first alternate ending I got after I beat the game the first time, but it was definitely the most satisfying. So I went in there, last time I saw it, I was in there, Chrono died, and I just beat the crap out of Lavos. I was like, yeah, take that, you son of a bitch. But yeah, and just the music in the game was probably the best music I had heard up until that point, and it was just so good. Like even in 16-bit form, other than probably like the opera scene and what's it, Celeste throwing herself off the mountain, walking up to face Magus for the first time just gave me chills so badly. Fire lighting up and
it's hard to, there's so much to it, storyline wise, and we'll talk about that in the next panel, but so many things, like the theme of Zeal alone is so, even though I guess because you don't realize that, the connections, because there really isn't one, it's mostly in the background, but when they show it, they play it when you kill Cyrus, and then you hear it again, you almost kind of, because of the ominous as you get closer to the center of Zeal, as people like to say, the kingdom of Zeal and her zealots, it's like they couldn't resist, and the people are such jerks, I think it's in Hasa, one person even says, they call themselves the Enlightened Ones, very arbitrary standard, I'm sure they're the ones who decide to call themselves that, and they said that light or something, you possess the same power as we do, it's like, it must be so primitive or inferior to us, you poor things.
And almost
can we pull out our swords,
And I didn't get this the first time I played through the game, it didn't happen until years later, but it took me a while, but I realized that Zeal was sort of an